What is up? What's going on? Shop Talk podcast. And once again, we are live from the Workbench. This is for episode 41. I believe it's the 8th of December. Oh yeah. So how was your Christmas? Huh? How about the New Year? I'm trying some different things with the levels. We'll see where we're at. I actually put out an episode 41 already. But I was a little drunk. And it was on the 28th of December. I was trying to get something out before the New Year. And yeah, it didn't work out that way. I was waiting for something to happen. Again, things happen. Nothing too exciting. Turn down some of these levels a little bit. Of course, we had a work party, and I had an Impossible Burger. If you don't know what that is, it's a all veggie plate based burger. But actually, I ate half of it there, and then later on, I heated it up, and it was better the second time around. That's for sure. So check those out. A couple different things going. I want to see some levels real quick. Yeah, it's all right.
Hey, so what do you want?
Yeah, so had a good New Year. All bundled up. Finally got the new house slippers. The $9 house slippers. The other ones just had a big hole in them for like a year, if you imagine that. And then we had, if you haven't listened to podcasts before, I've had Hayden on a couple times, and actually I have a bigger turnout on those episodes that he is on. I think he's on 40 and 37. The 37 one I think is a lot better than the 40, but I just need to get back onto my original schedule, basically, so I could put out these, do them Saturday night, put them out Sunday, and the whole point was to put out a podcast every Sunday. Sorry I haven't been around for a couple weeks. I needed to get some shit straight, get my head together. And then also, let me give you a little layout of here. I usually have the TV going down here, but the can't find the remote. I have a good idea where the remote is because my son has been down here, but let me give you a little layout so you can come over here and rob me. But I have this little surround sound system, and I only have the two front and the center speakers hooked up and a TV. Of course, the surround sound. Well, I guess the other day he dropped one of the speakers, and I was looking at it today. It's not really broken, but I don't know. I need to get this shit together down here. Anyways, we have some reads. I'll get to those. I've got about half of a good beer left. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, Hayden was on here. That was the whole point of me telling you this. So the last time he did a podcast with me, his parents called the cops on him. So he's he can't stay out that late anymore. And that's probably why he hasn't been back on. But he shot one of the videos. I'm trying to think, one of the cooking videos. But I got some different things in the works and whatnot. Also, let's get to some of these reads real quick. Of course, in the episode, the 41 that I did put out, I'm sure only a limited amount of people heard it. I took it down the following day. So some of that stuff's gone. But basically, it was LeBron James getting hurt with a groin injury. He could feel something pop. Joe Harris for the Brooklyn Nets. He was originally drafted to the Cavs. I should have looked it up because I'm sure it was in the early second round of that year. He's just playing phenomenal. He's a beast. I believe he's only 6'5" or 6'6". He's probably really like 6'4" in real life, but he's playing like a madman out there for them. And then also Patrick McCaw. He used to play for the Golden State Warriors and didn't come back to them, was holding out. And the Cavs signed him, and the Golden State Warriors didn't match it. He just finally suited up for the Cavs. I think it's a good thing. We also have some stuff with the NBA All-Star votes coming up. Danny Ainge, his rise to GM of the Celtics. He was destined. If you don't know who that was, look up, and this is what I was going to watch while I was down here, but I can't because I don't have the remote. Don't mess with Danny Ainge on YouTube. And it'll show all these different little clips of him fighting with people, and he was a sneaky player, but not as underhanded as John Stockton. But, his rise to GM, if you don't know, there was a guy named Red, I think you pronounce it Auerbach, for the Celtics, that at one point was the coach, GM, basically pretty much everything. Hell, he would smoke cigars during the games, if that tells you how long ago this was. Well, Danny Ainge and him were confidants, and at one point, Ainge was trying to convince Auerbach to trade Larry Bird at the end of his career, along with the Chief, which I remembered his name earlier, but Buck, I can't think of it. And if anybody knows anything about basketball, they know what the hell I'm talking about. Super long career. Now, I could be wrong, and I could be misplacing the Chief for McHale, but I highly doubt it. Also, let me clarify before I get to the All-Star votes, picks, whatever the fuck you want to call them. The NBA All-Star votes are coming up, and you can vote right now. There's so many days that are out of the way, and there's certain days that if you do it on NBA.com, that your vote will be worth, 2 votes. One vote will be worth 2 votes. And I also want to clarify, these picks are here because there's other picks that you can't pick. You can't pick, for instance, Kawhi Leonard. Super Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi Leonard. He's already... I'm sure he's already voted in, so that's why you can't pick him. LeBron James, there's another person. There's I'm sure Westbrook's on there. I'm sure all these different people are on there. So keep that in mind with the picks, because eventually some of these guys will be off the list anyways. And it's also fan-based, whatnot. So on my East Coast picks, and again, there was no rhyme or reason to it other than I did look at some of the stat lines. We'll get to some of that. But I also, some of these guys are just having a great year on on the East Coast first. I would have picked Jarrett Allen for the center position, but here's how it goes. His stats weren't as great as what you might think they would be, but he's been, he's been packing. He's been blocking everybody's shot all year long. He blocked LeBron James, but he wanted to block LeBron James, 6 years ago. Even if Jarrett was at the same age, keep that in mind. And you have to keep this in mind. So when you're picking these players, you have 3 positions. So you don't just have center, power forward, small forward. If they're that, you could pick all 3 different positions. It has nothing to do with the positions. It is front court and guards. So you have 3 front court guys, which would be your center, power forward, small forward. Now, it could be any combination of those and also as well as guards. So you could have 2 scoring guards. You see what I'm saying? You have 3 small forwards. You have 3 power forwards. You have 3 centers. You have a mixture of any of those 3 or any of those 2. So at the first lineup is more traditional. It had nothing to do with that at all. So front court, Joel Embiid, just having a great year. Front court also, Blake Griffin. I think he should still get in. Now, here's where some people go, eh. Well, so the other front court position, so you have 3 front court positions, is Jason Tatum. He typically plays the 4. He, in all essence, is really a 3, small forward. But, so he's in there. Well, he's only at like 16 points per game. And this is where people will give me shit. Let's see who's in there quick. This is where people will give me shit. At the guard position, I have Tim Hardaway Jr., you know. Who the fuck said that? And the reason why, for one, he's averaging over 20 points per game. He's having a better points per game this year than Jason Tatum. So everybody can say what they want. And you're going to go, well, why isn't Kawhi Leonard on the list? Well, I already just told you why Kawhi Leonard is not on the list. He's already off the list, so I can't fucking pick him. Okay, so, and then on the point guard, I don't know why he's still out there. Maybe it's because he was out so many games with injury. Kyrie Irving, even though the guy thinks the world's flat, I still picked him. You should see the game. I think it was when he first started for the Celtics. He was talking about they were going to play on this legendary court, the floor, basketball court for the Milwaukee Bucks, and he was talking about his knees and how old the court was going to be. Now, if anybody knows, and he might go, oh, I was just joking about that because he does that later on when he realizes he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. It was a new court, brand new court. They were just playing the old stadium. They're not breaking out 40 fucking year old court, but you should see that that clip. It just makes him look like a real big dumbass. On the West Coast, I have, now this is where a very non-traditional team, and this is all based on the front court guard. It has nothing to do with center, power forward, small forward, scoring guard, point guard, blah, blah, blah. So, first, front court has had so many good years in a row, overlooked so many times. Tobias Harris for the Los Angeles Clippers, also in the front court, not to be underrated. Paul George. And then my other pick for the front court, guy can play, point guard, scoring guard, small forward. And I don't know if it's a faux pas to have a rookie in this whole deal. Some might give me shit for that. But look at the stats. Look at his numbers. Listen to the man talk about him. Oh, Jesus. I can't think of his name. Yeah, Dirk Nowitzki. Luka Doncic, I mean, I don't care if he's a rookie. He should be in there. Can play any of the positions. If you haven't seen this guy play, go watch him play. And then also, I don't know why he was still in the voting for this. Maybe he hasn't got enough votes. My vote, I don't really care for the guy. He's a flopper. But he's a great player. James Harden, great scorer. Not so good on D. But I guarantee he plays better defense than I do. And then a comeback year, and I know everybody loves to see that, is the man, Derrick Rose, former MVP for the Minnesota Timberwolves, which I don't know how much of the Timberwolves they are. I think I just seen something today about Thibodeau getting fired. I have to look more into that. But again, back to these all-star votes, you have these older players that they're going to retire this year. Jamal Crawford, Vince Carter. I don't know necessarily that Carmelo Anthony is retiring. And I thought Dwayne Wade was retired. Obviously, he's switching jerseys, with Jamal Crawford when they play each other and with LeBron. But, um, you know, uh, hell, Dwayne could play another year. Carmelo Anthony could certainly play another year. I really actually think the other two guys could play another year too, but that has nothing to do with it. They should have like some type of legends game for these guys. I don't know. I hate to say it because then you want to go, well, you have to retire after this game. You can't just, well, not necessarily after the game because it'd be in the middle of the season, but you'd think that it would be something like that. It'd be like a farewell game, not just the last game of the season for the guys that aren't making the playoffs, but you would think they would do something like that to that extent. So then we also have some stuff to talk about. A company I used to work for 9 years that had been in business. Well, they've been lending money since 1950. Technically, they had really been in business since 1951. A lot of different little here and there discrepancies about it, but they had just sold their business, and I was under the impression that they were selling the business to another company. And, well, essentially, even if they sold it to themselves, they're still selling it to a different company. But, other people. I actually don't know if I have enough time this whole night to tell the story. And I can say their names now because, for one, the original owners are passed away. They're dead. I worked with the original owner and the son that became the owner, and he also incorporated the business sometime in the 90s. And some of the people may or may not still work there. Again, I don't know further details whether they bought the business, the workers themselves. That's kind of what happened with another place downtown that was also somewhat related to, and I can say their names. Basically, every single pawn shop in Columbus either knew of, dealt with, also derived from the place that is called Uncle Sam's Pawn Shop, and it's also called the Musician's Pawn Shop. And that's how I came to work there. I worked at a music store before that I used to take guitar lessons in. That's kind of how I got my foot in the door. I went from being a diesel mechanic at Caterpillar, making really good money as a very young man, to not making that much money at a pawn shop, but within a few weeks, I made okay money. Let's just put it that way, for how young I was. I made basically warehouse money, but I had a better job. And you're also coming across a lot of used products, and you have the opportunity to purchase them yourself. It took many years for the owner. I worked there for 9 years. As I got older, he treated me a lot better. So back in the 50s when they first started it, it was a guy named Irv Chasen, and there was also another owner. And at some point, either Irv bought him out or the guy walked away from the business. I could look into it further and figure it out. It doesn't matter. It's the fucking 50s. They were only really robbed twice. And the one time I actually worked there, we weren't really robbed. They stole a couple watches, but those watches were worth $25,000. So that's a whole nother story. And we'll get further into all this. This might just be a part one. Hell, I don't know. So Irv Chasen starts this. He had the opportunity to start Hallmark gift cards with another person, and thought, as a decent businessman, thought to himself, maybe gift cards aren't the way to go, right? And you can see where Hallmark gift cards are nowadays. I knew they had a business down in Texas that was just a liquor store. They went out of business. That's what happens. You try and you try again. Starting your own business is one of the hardest things you could ever do. And again, through the 70s, 80s, 90s, they were the place to go, especially to get a loan on an instrument because they hired other musicians that actually knew what the stuff was way before the internet. If you're listening, millennials, which technically I'm one, if you're listening, there was no internet. So how would you know what something is worth? Well, these guys would get Trading Times magazines. They would look up all the retail on different things. I remember when Mexican Strats, if you know what Fender Mexican Strats are, the standard Strats. I remember when they were $399.99 MAP, manufacturer's adjusted price. Basically, yeah. And then, I'm trying to think what the number was because there's a percentage of it. So the actual retail on it was $857.19 or something like that. I can't remember if that's 30% of it or 40% of it, but you can do the math. You can look it up. It's all true. Maybe it was $857.39. I don't fucking remember the cents, but it was $857 and some odd cents, computed to 60% or 70%, probably 70% of 60. Jesus, yeah, whatever. You fucking do the math. It doesn't matter. So back then, if you're a store and you're not a Fender dealer, you're not a Gibson dealer, you're not all these other dealers, which actually they carried a lot of brand new products, and they still do. Actually, it's not as good as it used to be. If the original owner would say, "Do we have more than one?" Because you go to him and you can I sell this? And I knew this because guys I worked with were working there before I was born, which I'll just throw it out there, 1984. So guys I worked with, in my mid-20s, early 30s, they had worked there with the original owner, which I also worked with. He'd come in, he was 96 years old, and he'd come in and he'd still do the books. Okay, so, and I'd walk him to his car every day, and he probably didn't even know my name. You know what I mean? Great guy. His son was a good guy. His son incorporated the business in the 90s, started running it, blah, blah, blah. Once he incorporated it, say something came into the inventory, after he was there. Well, that was his item. So when it sold, he got the profit from it. If it was before he incorporated the business, his father, the original owner, Irv, would get the money from it. The sad thing at the end, he was mismanaging the money so bad, and right when I started was about the time of the recession. Excuse me. He would take whatever money that was profited from it from his father and just not tell him it sold. I'm sure his dad knew what went on. There was a lot of things that went on before. Gary Chasen was, the son of the original owner, the one that incorporated the business in the 90s. Before that, early 90s, he had his own pawn shop. We were on 5th Street and Main Street, downtown Columbus, Ohio. And all the musicians that would come into town, that would fly in, drive in, tour bus in, usually would come in and stop and look for gear and whatnot. I'll just rattle off a few names. Joe Bonamassa, uh, Primus. Jerry was a race car driver. I'm trying to think. Leon Redbone. There was a girl from American Idol. I mean, James Taylor. You millennials. Uh, the list goes on and on and on. I'm trying to think where I was at in this goddamn story. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. So we were off 5th Street and Main Street. The roads are still there. The roads still exist. Some of them changed to one-ways and whatnot. So anyways, downtown Columbus is a different place. No offense to anybody, but thank God I'm not from there. There's not many fucking people that are from there. There's still, I wouldn't say it's like New York City, but it's somewhat similar. There's still men's boarding houses down there, where they can't have women overnight. Like dormitory style living, where you're sharing a kitchen, bathroom with other people on the same floor. It is a different world. So, Gary had a pawn shop that he started on 6th Street. Well, 6th Street right now is where Franklin University is. And they had, I don't know what the name for it is. I've heard it before from older people, mainly people that had worked there from the early 80s, where they revised the downtown area of that part of town. And they did away with that portion. I think they did away with all of 6th Street because I don't think it exists anymore. So all of that is just university. Okay? I think that's all. That may have been when they made a one-way a different way. So, Gary, of course, younger, at one point was married to a penthouse centerfold. There was also another, it was either a pawn shop or a music shop right next to it. And it wasn't called Guitar Center, excuse me, but it was called Guitar World. Can you imagine that? And Gary, being the snake at the time he was, sees the owner's wife, and rather than confront the owner, I don't know what the discrepancy was over, he threw some water on the owner's wife. Well, the next day, another guy shows up to his store and starts beating him with a golf club. And Gary told me the story, and he must have already been 74, 75 when he told me this, maybe 73. And I said, no one's ever, what did I tell him? I can't remember. Like, no one's ever told me anything like that before. And he goes, I never told anyone that before. You know what I mean? So, a lot of craziness. Again, this is more likely the 60s or the 70s, when that happened. Whenever that revision of that part of town was. Anyway, so eventually he came into the business. He was always lingering around anyways, and yeah, he incorporated the business. And basically his father was, I wouldn't say he was tired of it. Gary would pretty much do what he would want anyways, and it would piss his dad off. And then he just finally just said, well, then you take it over. You do it, basically. So anyways, so back in the day too, before I go too far ahead, what I was trying to get at was you weren't a dealer for these different places, different companies, major companies. You were a pawn shop. You can only get certain items. Well, they carried brand new stuff like Latin percussion when it was still USA stuff. They had some real nice stuff. But Gary was a hoarder, and he didn't want to sell much of anything. And even when I started working there, the sales tactics were changing in America because the high pressure salesmen, they were either getting too old and getting out of the business, and their kids were taking over, or just the climate also was changing of salesmen. You didn't have that dirty, car salesman, Art Schleister kind of fucking thing going on. Just the world was changing a little bit, and also people. I've always been a very low pressure salesperson, and I say salesperson, but I will say that pawn shop had it would try to hire salesmen, and I'm not talking about, excuse me, saleswomen. I'm talking about salesmen, and it was much like a boys' club. Uh, Even after the 90s. Of course, I didn't work there in the 90s, but that's what it was referred to in the 90s. Another pawn shop that kind of came off that was Buckeye Pawn. Jim French, which him and his brothers run Buckeye Pawn. Jim is one of the owners. Gary Gabriel's the other. He's the coin. Jim worked there for 10 years before another guy, Russ. And Jim's father was basically the manager, store manager, whatever you want to call it, general manager, store manager of the store. There's only one store, so of course. Basically, the owners, all they had to do was come in and have coffee. If you get that phrase. All the books were done. He already made coffee too. Jim French did. Well, when he passed away, young Jim French, at the time, he was young then, went to them for money to, and this is what I was told. So, yeah, it is all hearsay. That he went to them for money to bury his father. They said, sorry, we don't have any money. He got pissed off, found an investor, or I don't know if he's in tight with Gabriel. And he started his own pawn shop, and he's got a few around Columbus. Well, then also Lev's kind of derived from it a little bit too. Lev, I think it was 1979, 1980. Lev has stores all over Columbus. He has a few stores in Indiana. He has I don't know what the fuck he's got, but he's got something down in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So he's spread out a little bit all over the place. I worked for another company for a year. I worked for Uncle Sam's for 9. I worked for another company that was a conglomerate company. They were called Cashland. They did payday lending, predatory lending, in my opinion. And then they also, later on in the game, a few years ago, they started doing pawns. And then a couple years ago, whatever weird licenses they had, they started selling the stuff in their stores. But they merged most recently. I'm trying to think. The final merging, I think it was last year. Last year around this. No, last year, maybe 15 months ago, with another company. They were Cash America. Cashland was just their business front. Cash America, and there's another company, I can't remember the hell they're called. They merged together, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, it was rumored for years that they were going to buy out Lev's stores. Now, if you weren't on both sides of the coin, I guarantee everybody that works for Lev's has never heard that. And I'll give you a shout out, Darren, right there. And maybe you have heard that before, but maybe they never offered enough money. I don't know. I don't know what the fuck's going on. I got to figure it out. So where are we at right about now? We're all over the place. Anyways, Jesus. You couldn't have these back in the 60s, 70s. You wanted to be a Fender dealer, a Gibson dealer. Back then it was very easy to be. When you came to the 80s and 90s, that's when stuff started changing. You have stuff coming from Japan. When it was all USA stuff, you know, I was told after Gary passed away, was talking to Lev directly to him, and Gary made a point. Oh, I didn't get to that. Okay. 1979, 1980, Lev goes to them and wanted a job working for them. But I think he wanted something to do with some kind of ownership, and they told him no. I think maybe they would have hired him as a worker, but he wanted to start his own business. He's a businessman, 30, 40 pawn shops all over Columbus, all over the place. They told him no. He said, and I come from Gary, Lev said to them that he would not start a store right across the street. He was going to start a store, but he was going to start somewhere else. So where does he start his first store? Right across the street, East Main Street, right across the street from Uncle Sam's only location. And there's some crazy other shit too. One of the workers found another location back in the 90s. I think that he wanted to call it Uncle Sam's Emporium or something like that. Or, I can't think of the word. But it basically just means extra stuff. And they could have had a store on the west side. He found a store for it, figured out the rent, blah, 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 went to him about it. Not a good idea. But at that point, late 80s, early 90s, the old boss might have been on the, he's a cocaine cowboy at that point. Who knows? Or just long fucking nights. There's a lot of crazy shit that went on. It was a good place to work for. I will say that. At the end, maybe not so much. You had a guy hiring his own buddies, which that's fine. Who cares? Whatever. But when you change the atmosphere of the place, it's a little different story. So I feel pretty much like I'm talking in circles, kind of missing things here and there. Again, it's a little scatterbrain. I totally get it. I kind of don't know where to start. It's been almost, in a few months, it'll be a year since I've been in the pawn shop industry. Which I don't really like saying that word. I used to work with a guy that said that, but he only worked there for a couple of years, and that was it. And then he worked down in Florida. Great guy, actually, by the way. And I don't feel bad if I name drop. His name's Brady, but it is whatever. The place has a shit ton of history. Let's just put it that way. If those walls can talk. Leon Redbone wrote on the side of the wall that led up to the attic where they have all the drums and whatnot. And, they painted over it because they didn't pay attention. You know what I mean? There's all different stories and whatnot, and we'll get more into that. I think this will continue to go on, especially till I really find out what happened with the sale of them. I don't know if the workers bought them, but I know that as of right now, they're not giving out pawn loans. And a lot of you, if you are listening to this and you don't know what a pawn loan is, I've listened to previous podcasts that I've put out. You'll understand exactly what a pawn loan is. But they're not giving out pawn loans, but they still have the loans there. I believe they're still collecting the interest on that. And Lev, that again is right across the street, is interested in buying all their pawns, and that's basically what it boils down to. If you're going to transition from a pawn shop to just a retail shop and you still have these pawn loans, naturally, you would sell those loans to another pawn shop. The pawn shop with the other pawn shop that is buying them would pay the principal, at least, I doubt they're paying pennies on the dollar, but I would think they would even pay a tiny bit more, especially on certain things that they know that the person's already paid so much into. But I think naturally, maybe even by law, all you would have to actually pay is the principal, which is the amount that is loaned on that item. It's a collateral loan. So, I knew I got a little off subject there for a second. One of the people that I forgot to mention, that was another person that worked there for 10 years. And his joke was, you can only work there for 10 years. I worked there for 9 years. Was Mike Tachi. He's still in business. Mike's Pawn Shop on Cleveland Avenue. Just get tired of all the... There's a shit ton of tension in that whole building. Let's just put it that way. Very competitive, though. I like that in nature. But yeah, so we'll get further into it. Maybe a later segment. I won't be away for so long. I know it's been a few weeks actually, since the 18th December, I believe so. But yeah, I mean, it's bringing me back. I miss a lot of the guys that I worked with. It's funny because I know that a lot of them like me. They're, everybody had their problems with other people. I just think maybe bringing some of the older people back. That was the thing. Is if you were 50 years old or 40 years old, you were still young, in everybody else's eyes that worked there. I know after I wasn't there, I know they got rid of a lot of other people too. And Ken and Nancy, they were really good people. Fine jewelers, they really knew their stuff. Everybody that worked there pretty much knew their stuff, and that's where the competitive nature lied. Everybody knew their stuff, I wasn't one of the so much smarter ones there. It wasn't like Pawn Stars where you call on an expert. We had the experts there. One of the guys that was very knowledgeable, but he was also a big-time liar, worked there. And he would lie about petty stuff that didn't mean anything. He would consider the source. But in all, at the end of the day, it was a good guy. But just, I don't know. That place was a mind fuck. Let's just put it that way. I don't know. There'll never be another pawn shop like it. I know. One day. There's laws and limitations and things with your license to be a pawn shop. And it's just amazing that I don't know if they don't want to continue on as a pawn shop, but I know that they're not taking new loans. So maybe they're trying to obtain a pawn license, which I hope they are, and they try to keep the tradition alive. I do, however, hope that not necessarily the daughters that inherited the business, but more so the son-in-laws. And thank God I've got my fucking half-inch soapbox to fucking preach on. But I hope that they keep them since they are no longer have any type of ownership over the business. The son-in-laws of Gary, Andrew, I won't mention your name. You guys are fucking dickheads. Okay, that's all I gotta say. Don't even remember your name up in Cleveland. Still don't remember your name up in Cleveland. I don't care. I hope you guys aren't even allowed in that business. If I bought the business, which I couldn't afford to do, but there's at least one person in my family that could afford to do it, if not more, you guys wouldn't be allowed in the business at all. I'm just putting it out there. Yeah, you're a mockery of morality. They're just disrespectful people. I mean, I don't care what kind of job you have. I don't care what you do for a living. They're just underhanded. We'll just keep it at that, underhanded. But yeah, we'll go into maybe this will be Uncle Sam's Pawn Shop History 2 sometime this week or next week. And I've got some other cooking videos coming out. We'll get further more into it. We'll keep it, we'll say we're right at about the 90s, if your head's not spinning from the whirlwind of shit that I was just in. Yeah, there'll be some good things that will come out of this. So I hope everybody had a great Christmas and a good New Year. And I know I did. And yeah. So, Jesus. Let's see here.
Where's my cat?
I killed your cat, you druggy bitch!
God, what? Why?
Who the fuck said that? Who's the slimy little communist shit twinkle-toed cocksucker down here who just signed his own death warrant? Nobody, huh?
Let's see if I'm on the right number. I need to turn this shit down. Here we go.
Hey, so what do you want?
What I've always wanted is to watch you die.
Yeah. Not necessarily you. So you guys have a good weekend. Yeah, good weekend. The weekend's over. We'll get back to that. Maybe on Tuesday another podcast will come out. You guys take care. Let's see if I hit the right number.
Please like and subscribe
Nope.
and share so I can think my dad is cool.
There we go. Check out the other podcasts. There'll be new ones to come out. Thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe.